Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Ontario Cryptids. It's great to see you back for another week of chilling encounter stories. And I hope you all enjoyed the holidays this past week. Today I have a few encounter stories to share with you all, and I hope you stick around and enjoy. If you enjoy this kind of content, don't forget to hit the like button, the subscribe button, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. And if you have an encounter of your own, I'd love to hear about it. Send your stories to OntarioCryptids@gmail.com. Now, sit back and relax, and let's jump into this week's encounter stories. A few years ago, I had a rather amazing encounter with a spirit of some sort. The boring context was that I worked in a small modern concrete office building. It was a 2-story building with 2 entrances with metal doors and hydraulic arms that automatically closed the doors with a loud metallic clang if opened. I was working late and someone at the company had volunteered their conference room to some group that wanted it for a meeting. They arrived at the doors at 7 p.m. It was winter and very cold. There were 4 of them. The door had glass panels so you could see out. But the woman nearest the door captivated me. Unlike the other 3, she wasn't dressed for the American cold winter. She wore a light gold-colored wrap-type garment. She smiled at me with the biggest smile, like she loved me. I let them in. The other 3 took their coats over to the lobby and hung them up. As they did, this captivating woman in the gold wrap looked at me and smiled a beaming smile. She radiated peace and love. I stared at her, completely enchanted. I tried to guess her ethnicity. She could have been Spanish or Middle Eastern or Asian. I couldn't tell. She just smiled at me and seemed to hover, twisting her torso. She occasionally pulled her beautiful golden wrap garment up over her shoulders. She never said a word, just smiled at me. It felt great, not awkward. After a short while, her colleagues went into the conference room and she with them. I went back up the steps to the open plan work area upstairs, still thinking about this encounter with this magnetic and delightful woman. An hour later, I heard them emerging from the conference room, and I was determined to see this woman again. I hurried down the steps, only to find the 3 people. "Where's the woman?" I blurted out. I couldn't stop myself. "What woman?" they responded. I'm sure they thought I was crazy at this point. "The woman who came in with you," I said. They looked at me like I was definitely crazy. I looked for her in the woman's bathroom, convinced she had to still be there somewhere. I would have heard the door clanging shut if she had left separately. No sign of her. She was there, for me at least. She didn't seem like a ghost, more like a visitor, if that makes sense. She radiated goodness and was utterly captivating, and just for my viewing pleasure, apparently. When my son was a toddler, he kept pointing at the corner of a room and giggling, going, "Mama, Mr. Coffee Man." I didn't really take it that seriously and thought it was some sort of imaginary friend. He did this maybe 5 or so times when he was a toddler, and I would sometimes catch him talking to someone that wasn't there, and then stop and giggle when I entered the room. This went on for a good couple of years until Mr. Coffee Man was mainly forgotten, as we got busy with sports, school, etc. Recently, while having a family dinner, we were talking about imaginary friends, and I told them how my son had named one Mr. Coffee Man. My mother-in-law just about choked on her roast when I said that. She said my husband would point at the corner of the room when he was about 2 years old and would clap and giggle and yell, Mr. Coffee Man! Mind you, we didn't live in the same house. My husband and I live in a house about 2 hours away from where he grew up. My husband also never talked about Mr. Coffee Man. He said he vaguely remembers, and when I asked my son, he's now 7, he said he also barely remembers, but he thought Mr. Coffee Man was a distant relative or a friend we're not close to anymore. When I quizzed them both about what he looked like, they both pretty much said tall, big smile, funny, but couldn't remember facial features or details. Also, I don't know why they both call him Mr. Coffee Man. We still couldn't figure out who Mr. Coffee Man was and why they saw the same image. I don't remember the exact date this happened. My dad's family were all from Missouri. Dad and his 6 brothers were all born and raised around Steelville, Missouri. They were all outdoorsmen, fishing, hunting, and trapping. Only one of them said anything about seeing an unusual animal. He worked at a place called Montauk State Park. I think that is where he saw it. When I asked him what kind of unusual animal, he refused to talk about it. I wish now I had tried to get him to talk about it, but I didn't. We were floating on the Big Piney River at about 10 o'clock at night. My uncle and cousin in one boat and my dad and I in another. We would float the river till we got to a certain spot and then fish from the banks until it got dark. Then we would put on our jitterbug lures and float the last hole of water before we got out. It was a very dark night, no moon. We could see by the starlight where the tree line was. My uncle asked us if we would not wear any light-colored clothes, I guess as to not spook the fish. So here we are drifting silently down the river, and I mean silently. When I caught a fish, I had some trouble getting it on the stringer. My uncle asked me to turn off the light that I was using. A few minutes later, as we drifted silently down the river, which flows very slowly by the way, we hear this hair-raising, blood-curdling scream, the likes of which I have never heard before or since. It was amazing, like something out of a horror film, only worse. Very loud, and it seemed to go on for a long time. Now that I think about it, it was probably only about 15 seconds. It seemed much longer at the time. I asked my dad what was that, and he very quietly said, "I don't know." Then I asked my uncle what it was. No answer. I could hear my uncle and my cousin talking in hushed tones. I heard my cousin say, "Momo?" I asked my uncle again, what was that? And he said that it was a cow and forget about it. Now, I admit to being a city boy, but a cow? Really? Later, he said it was a cow drowning. An animal that size drowning would have disturbed the water. The river was calm as glass. There were no sounds that you would expect to hear from an animal drowning. I think it was the best thing he could think of at the time. My uncle was very religious, and I don't believe that he could accept the idea that there might be some hairy missing link running around in the forest. Everything seemed normal before we heard this. Afterwards, it was just weird. Even the woods seemed different. The usual sounds were gone. The scream had a female quality to it at first. Then, as it trailed off, it took on more of a masculine tone. Not like a grunt. I believe we put ourselves in a perfect position to spook something on the bank while silently drifting down the river. I know there is a trail along the bank where the scream came from. I would not have had the guts to go back in there that night, but I wanted to go the next day. My dad refused to let me. It seemed that I was the only one that wanted to talk about this. I remember the look of fear in my cousin's eyes. They were big as silver dollars. I think this scared my dad more than he wanted to admit. We never fished this stretch of river again. I think it scared the crap out of all of us. We had flashlights but didn't use them. maybe we didn't want to see what it was. I've always regretted not using the flashlight because I will never know what it was. I think about that a lot. The best first-hand account for me happened in the summer of 2012. I got a temp job for the summer to make some money, and I was starting my first semester of college in August. I worked night shifts and would get home on average around 2 or 2:30 a.m. My usual routine when I got home was to shower off, eat something, and watch a little TV to wind down for bed. The back door of the house was glass and looked directly into the wooded tree line, which is about 70 to 75 yards away. 30 yards away is a lone cedar tree that we built a pen around for our outside hound dog. When I got home that night, I stepped outside and took a treat to her and gave her some belly rubs. That time outside, it was your typical Tennessee southern night. It was muggy from the summer pop-up showers that happened that day, cloudy enough to block the stars, but not thick enough to completely shut out the moonlight, lightning bugs, cricket chirping, and frogs calling. I went back inside to eat my food and my nightly ritual. When I got done, I was going to step outside one more time to relieve myself because it's out in the country with no neighbors. Plus, I didn't want to flush the toilet and wake anyone up since by now it was close to 4 a.m. in the morning. When I went outside this time, I started noticing that there was no sounds at all. No crickets, no owl hoots, absolutely nothing. I thought that was kind of odd, as even when I've seen predators walking by while hunting like coyotes or bobcats, you still can hear squirrels chattering to alert each other and other woodland sounds. I was about to go back in until I heard a loud crack directly in front of me coming from the woods. It sounded like someone swung a baseball bat against a tree. I waited for a few seconds and then I heard the exact same sound come from the woods roughly 100 yards to the left of where the first one came from. Both times I looked towards the dog pen to see if she woke up because they were extremely loud. I still couldn't see her in the faint moonlight, so I reached back inside to the kitchen counter and pulled out the flashlight we kept there. This was an old flashlight from the 80s that basically was bright enough to see around where you were when we lost power, but definitely not strong enough to penetrate deep woods in the dark from the back porch. I started walking uphill towards the woods, angling myself in the direction of the pen to check on my dog. As I got closer, I got hit with what smelled like a mixture of skunk and rotten meat, but extremely potent. I had to fight back dry heaving. Coyotes smell bad, and obviously skunks do too, but this was something I've never encountered in my time, 10 years plus of hunting and exploring the old logging trails in those woods. By now, I got close enough to where the flashlight would be able to see at least a little ways into the trees. I shined the light back and forth between the area of the first and second knocks. I could hear leaves crunching every so often, but they would always stop when I got the light on that spot. I started to call for my dog in a low voice because it was unusual for her not to be out and firing off warning barks at coyotes and bobcats that came too close. I took my eyes off the woods for a bit to shine the light on her pen, and I saw her with her back pressed all the way against the back of her doghouse and pawing the ground like she's trying to push herself further back. She was lightly whimpering and would look at me and then turn her head in the direction of the woods and then back at me, almost like she was trying to say, I should be looking that way, not at her. By now, the hair on my neck and arms were standing straight up, and I got the hit with what felt like my stomach dropping. My ears started ringing, and every alarm bell in my head was going off, telling me to move and get back into the house, but I couldn't move. I heard one last crunch and I was able to cut my light in time to get a brief flash of eye shine before it disappeared behind a tree. I finally snapped back into after my mind processed the color, as it wasn't that bluish green color a deer would give off, but that red and yellow shine a predator would have. While I had the light trained on that tree, the second set of footsteps started back up, working its way closer from where I first heard that second knock, from down the hill to where now it had covered way more ground than should be possible for an animal. I backpedaled down the hill to the porch and ran downstairs to wake up my dad and grab his shotgun. By the time we got back to the porch, the smell had faded to not nearly as nauseous, and my dog had come out and was sitting at the gate of her pen with her back to us looking into the trees. My dad said it was probably a coyote, and I briefly argued, as he knew as well as I did, our hound mixed dog goes ballistic at coyotes or any animal for that matter. I think he might have just been grumpy that I woke him up at that time of night and said he was going back to bed. I didn't sleep at all until the sun came up and I finally dozed off. My adrenaline was the highest it's ever been, and that's the closest I've ever felt to the fight or flight scenario. I walked up to the woods that afternoon before I went into my shift at work to look for signs. I couldn't find any footprints, but there were broken limbs that I could barely reach on my tippy toe. And I went to the tree where I saw the eye shine. From my estimates, the height of the tree where the lowest branch was that the eyes were parallel with was at least 7.5 feet off the ground. That's going to be it for today, folks. Thank you so much for sticking around until the end. I truly hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. Now, a huge thank you goes out to our current channel members, Elizabeth, Jim, and Teresa. Thank you guys for your ongoing support. It is truly appreciated. If you haven't already, don't forget to hit that like button, the subscribe button, and hit that notification bell so you'll never miss another upload. And if you have an encounter of your own, I'd love to hear about it. Send your stories to OntarioCryptids@gmail.com, and it could be featured in a future episode. Wishing you all a fantastic week ahead, and don't miss next week's episode of Ontario Cryptids.